Hey, what's up, Shining Otaku? It's Cloud9 here today. Shake Zula, the Mike Schooler, the old schooler you want a trip. I want to bring it to you. So I know I'm messing with you guys. I'm just like to have a little bit of fun. And for some reason lately, I've been referencing a lot of Adult Swim. I don't know why. But in any case, today is going to be yet another Your Manga Sucks writing edition video. And we're going to talk a bit about the over controlling writer or the micromanaging writer. This is something that I know some of you out there probably have an issue with. I've had this issue before, especially if you're someone who is solely more on the writing side than you are on the art side. And maybe you're somebody who works with a lot of artists, then this video is going to be a lot more for you than it is going to be for someone who does both the art and the writing together as a package. Now, if you're an artist solely, then this video is also going to be for you a bit because, of course, we're going to be having a dialogue kind of more on the writing side, on how things go between the relationship between artists and writers. In any case, let's just dive into this. So, one of the biggest things that happen with artists and writers, I would say, is you'll have the writer, of course, that has this vision for how they want their project to be. They see this big magical castle in their head, and then they end up getting this deep, dark dungeon of a cave. And they kind of wonder, well, why did it turn out this way? And then they tear into the artist, and they don't like how the artist is portraying the vision of the work that they've seen in their head when they saw this big, giant, amazing looking castle that ended up becoming a cave somehow. Well, I'm going to tell you something. One of the biggest things that I will say that actually my teacher, Mark Dudley from Imaginos Workshop, kind of says, or pushes a lot, is that writers and artists are basically in a marriage. It's a marriage in comics whenever you're doing writing and art. The artist, of course, is giving you the visual, telling the story visual, of course, the visual story. But, of course, you're telling them meat and potatoes. You're giving the inside, in-depth information as the writer. You're the one who's laying out that foundation for everything to be built on. A lot of times when writers give their stories to artists, I feel like, because I'm going to be honest here, and this may feel like a lot of you out there may feel like I'm cutting a few of you by saying this, but, there's a ton of writers out there, but a lot of writers who don't know how to write. And that even includes like a lot of artists who also write and think they know how to write, but don't know how to write. But the difference is between art and writing is that you can look at someone's art and tell if their art isn't really up to par with a professional standard, as opposed to with writing, you actually have to take the time to be able to look in and read it and go through the whole story in order to be able to see, if they're able to pull you in. So that takes a bit more time, which means a lot of people think writing is a lot easier to do. So when you have a lot of these writers out here who, of course, have these scripts and they give it to these artists, they think that they're conveying the right information to the artist to be able to create this story. If, let's say, there's someone who is either collabing with someone or even hiring somebody on for a project, but really they're not really either giving I'm not going to say enough information, because I'm sure there's a lot of you out there say, I gave them plenty of information and they gave them this novel worth or this 3-book essay worth of information. But really what it comes down to is, are you giving the right information? Are you telling them the key details that they need to know in order to be able to convey that story? And it's also very important to mention that when you are giving them those key details to lay out this story, are you making sure that you allow them enough room to be able to breathe to tell that story? What I mean by that is that the artist is also telling the story too. They're just doing a different aspect of the story. Everyone who works on a comic, I don't care if you're doing the lettering, I don't care if you're doing, the art aspect, or if you're doing the writing aspect, or even editor, you all have a role in playing in terms of telling that story. That's literally, just a part of how it is with comics or anything that that's involved within creating like in any kind of entertainment or stories, even if you were talking about in other mediums. So with that being said, you want to make sure that you're not just giving them so many details to the point where now you're not allowing them to really interpret it, and really it's more or less you trying to take their hand, as my teacher would say, and draw it for them. That's something that you don't want to be the case. That's usually how you end up having projects, well, one, that end up feeling very disjointed, or in some cases the art might, like in terms of the way the flow of events, might feel a little bit off, because at the end of the day there are things that artists, when they're going from panel to panel, know from telling the story, in terms of conveying that, versus the writer who's doing that. It's also important to understand how stories are told within comics if you're a writer. Because again, if you are working with an artist and they are more experienced with, let's say, telling a story within comics, then you need to know how to be able to match them in that format. And the same goes for any artists that are working with a writer who's experienced with working in comics. If they're used to creating a page, then just because you know how to draw doesn't mean you necessarily know how to turn your art into a story that can be conveyed on that page. So it's very important that there be a lot of communication when you're working with each other. And that's an easy thing to say, but I would say a lot of these things need to be conveyed up front when you start working on a comic, rather than just in the midst of a project. Kind of like in a marriage. In a marriage, two people, they sit together, they sit down, and they talk about, what their expectations are going into it. So, some people may have a more traditional mindset, if you think about it, like in the terms of a marriage, where maybe, one person's the breadwinner, one person takes care of home. Then some people believe in a big mixture of both. It's the same thing when you're doing with a project with writing and art. If you're not doing both responsibilities, it's to making sure that you both balance that and have an understanding. And of course, while you're working on it, you can get clarification from each other if you're not really understanding. But again, it's more or less that you're wanting to bullet point what is important as the writer, and letting the rest of it be conveyed in terms of the visuals by that artist. They're the camera person. That's the best way to put it, is that they are the person holding the camera, and they are basically peering in and showing you what it is that we're seeing in this world. So you can't take the camera from them, or you shouldn't at least. You need to allow them to do that. And of course, I would say when you're both working on it, not to get too arrogant about it, because I think that happens quite a bit too between the two. One thinks they know way more than the other, rather than trying to maybe have an understanding of what both of them are trying to get out of it, so that you can have a project that at least is satisfactory to both of you. Because even if you're someone who, let's say for example, if you're hired in to do a project, you're going to want to make sure, I'm sure you want it to at least be something satisfactory, because at the end of the day, you're still putting your name on it. So whether you're doing the writing for someone or you're doing the art for someone. But in any case, this has been another Your Manga Sucks writing video. If you do enjoy writing videos, if you enjoy videos talking about comics, laying out the foundation of comics, or even talking about the history of comics, go ahead and subscribe to the Shining Otaku page down below, and hit the bell so you can get any updates. We throw these videos out every other week, so you'll see us again next Thursday. Also, if you want more in-depth, more deep diving type of videos that will give you the knowledge that you desire within comics, I will definitely recommend going ahead and checking out the Imaginos Workshop page, which there will be a link down below to that as well. Go ahead and hit subscribe to that page and check out some of the class videos that are on that page. Definitely some of the best content around, and it goes really deep and really breaks down comics by Mark Dudley. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching, and I will see you in 2 weeks.